Alright guys, subscribe again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. With the World Championship just around the corner, Optic Texas have revealed who their scrim partners currently are going into the World Championship. A pretty good set of scrim partners it seems, especially due to their Bocage weaknesses they've had so far. And seemingly they are making a fair bit of progress as well, with Arsatis from FaZe saying that he's having a difficult time tracking Shotzzy on the map right now. Is Shotzzy hitting new form before the World Championship begins? Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thanks very much indeed for doing that one. First of all, wanted to mention this from the COD League. Pretty cool. I think they do this most years in fairness, but they're dropping beta codes, weapon blueprints, this type of stuff every day of the World Championship. I'm guessing this time around, I think it was only Modern Warfare that they did like the 2 weekends for the World Championship. I guess it was done online, but they had like the 12 teams down to 4 on the first weekends, and then they have the actual championship weekend or the playoffs or whatever they call it the weekend after. Of course, this is just one weekend of action, Thursday through Sunday, as we normally get, but there's a few rewards up for grabs as well the CDL are putting on offer. This has got to be one of the craziest scorelines, well, actual scoreboards really, that I've seen so far this season. Mance tweets this out from, I guess, what is a scrim, and as you can see here, I mean, it's not really on the big screen, but I mean, there you go. I guess you can just about see it. We've got Insight, Chemi Clinics, and Bantsy on the left-hand side, getting 17, 25, 24, 26 kills. Nothing really amiss, but Bance somehow has less than 1,000 damage. Like, it almost looks like this is just a bugged number for some reason, because I guess Bance was just killing, like, everyone he was killing was just absolute one bullet run. I guess these guys were getting so much damage in, and Bance was just finishing people off. So to have the most kills on his team and have 1,000 damage is just such a ridiculous number. Now, speaking of the World Championship, the Challengers World Championship, of course, is coming up alongside the main CDL champs, and I thought it was pretty cool that 9 countries, I think it was maybe, was it 7 countries represented in the regular CDL champs. In the Challengers champs, there's actually going to be 9 countries represented, of course, at US, England, Spain, Australia, Argentina, Belgium, Canada, Chile, and of course, Scotland. Some pretty cool stuff to see. I thought hopefully, you know, the Latin American teams, the Australian teams can put up a good fight here, because, like, look, if it comes down to the grand final and it's the 2 or is it 3 US teams that are there, 3 NA teams that are there, then you know, maybe it'll just be pretty boring, but maybe expected at the end of the day. And these, of course, are the 8 teams attending. If you guys aren't familiar with this, or if you missed yesterday's video, that these are the 8 teams at the Challengers World Championship. Arguably, there should be many more. Like, that's the thing with Challengers. They do a lot of things in the Challenger side, like it used to be done back in the day, as in, they've got the double best of 5s in the grand finals. A lot of the format ideas are relatively similar. The fact that Esports Engine are running it and have done a pretty good job the last couple of seasons. Albeit, though, when it comes to the champs, they seemingly threw out the idea of doing this 32-team gauntlet bracket for champs and just have the 8 teams there, but I guess travel, expenditure, funding, like getting, you know, these teams accommodation and stuff was maybe too much for the CDL to worry about, so they've just gone for these 8 teams, but of course someone's going to come out on top. Maybe they should take a couple of lessons from back in the Black Ops 3 days and what was going on then. Obviously, we wish back in Black Ops 3 there were more events than there were that season, but I mean, yeah, I don't really know for Call of Duty to take the next step. Really, I think the key thing for CODs, like, to actually take the next step of an esport is just for the game to be better, right? Like, the last couple of years have just been, it's so tough for the game to grow when the quality of the actual broadcast isn't particularly good, and also the game itself is not really attracting new viewers to the competitive side. I think that's the key issue, so maybe Modern Warfare 2022 can do something about that. But I even saw some rumors yesterday that they're not even going to release, like, footage of multiplayer until after the COD World Championship. Usually there's leaks about, or there's a multiplayer reveal around about now or before champs time, but instead it's going to be after champs, which makes me wonder whether multiplayer in this game is actually in a good state. But like, it's got to be a big game for Call of Duty, so I suppose they've got to deliver the goods on this one. Now let's talk Optic Texas, right? They're going into the World Championship. Last year they had a pretty tough time as Optic Chicago when Formal was there, Envoy was there, and Scump and Envoy tested positive shortly before the event. They weren't sure they were even going to be able to fly out. I believe they tested negative on the one day they had to get the flight they needed to get out there, and Dashi and Formal were there at the venue thinking, well, we don't even know who we're going to play with. We might be playing with General and Sender this event, and they were kind of losing the plot, to be honest. Now, eventually, the guys do end up getting out there in full force, but their practice was kind of thrown off as a result of it. They went in, they got top 6, not their greatest result of the World Championship ever, of course, especially these two on your screen right now. But this season could be a different story. They certainly would be favoured to get better than top 6 this time around. But we looked at after their Major 4 performance, what exactly do they need to level up on? Their control, their Berlin, their Bocage hardpoints, certainly some key weaknesses in their map pool. Their Search and Destroy was great, but certainly some key weaknesses that Optic Texas have to focus on these couple of weeks. And they're playing at teams in scrims right now that may well be benefiting them quite significantly indeed. So the way the champs bracket works is you don't really want to play teams that are on your side of the bracket. It's often rather difficult for these teams to get good practice because you're going into the World Championship. Do you really want to play teams very much that you're actually going to play at champs? Like, you kind of have to though, right? Because you don't really want to practice against, I mean, look, the only teams you could realistically play play against are the amateur teams going to the Challengers World Championship. Right? You could play Toronto Ultra Academy NA, teams like that, which would be decent practice still, maybe good teams to practice in Search and Destroy, because you don't really want to give any Search and Destroy strats and ideas away to the top dogs. But then again, if you scrim Ultra Academy NA and you give away some S&D ideas, are they then not going to just tell your actual starting team, the Toronto Ultra main team, that Optic play round one? So you've got to think about these things as well, potential communications that could go on between organizations, academy rosters, main teams, stuff like this. So practicing Search and Destroy is of course a little bit tricky, but in respawns you're not going to give that much away. Generally just better to get the best practice you possibly can up against the best respawn teams in the game. That's pretty much what Optic are doing at the present time. Arsteez tweets this out yesterday. I'm miserable right now. You ever try and find Shotzzy on the map without AC? I want to cry, he said. So yes, Shotzzy may be hitting a new levels here going into the World Championship, saying that, it's really tough. I mean, look, Shotzzy finding him on the map is difficult at the best of times, especially on maps like Berlin, that they don't seem to play too much right now, but maybe they're changing their ways on that. But obviously revealing here that FaZe were scrimming up against them and having a rather difficult time trying to find Shotzzy, right? So of course, look, we don't know how the results of these scrims went, but we do know the FaZe were practicing against Optic. And earlier this year, I feel like they didn't actually play each other too much because they didn't want to give anything away. They felt like those two teams were the top dogs. Now that's not so clearly the case anymore, so I guess they want to get the best practice they possibly can up against each other. And Rambo explains the teams that they are currently scrimming against. It's the 4 teams on the other side of the bracket to Optic, and actually based on the way the bracket's looking, it could be a pretty perfect set of 4 teams to practice against to get the best possible reps going into Chaps.
So our scrims are basically we scrim basically the same teams on a two-day rotation. Yes, we are currently scrimming the FaZe. Yeah, NYSL, Seattle, FaZe, and London are the 4 teams we scrimmed. See, the weird thing with scrimming challenger teams is that we play on the, when we scrim, we play on the CDL servers, and there's certain times of the year where we're able to play the AM teams on the CDL servers because the patch, whatever the patch we use on the CDL accounts was the exact same as the regular wild patch. But for whatever reason, the last month and a half, 2 months, the patch always been different. Even though the game's the same, the patch are different, so we'd have to scrim on our regular accounts, and the game feels very different. What the AMs play on compared to what the pros play on is very different from a playing standpoint. So
this is the bracket that Optic are looking at, right? So obviously they're not going to play against Toronto. They don't want to give anything away. Don't want to practice and give any tendencies to a team that they're going to play in the very first round. And that's the thing. Most of these teams are going to prepare pretty much just for the teams they play round one. Of course, if you're FaZe or if you're a Seattle or even if you're Los Angeles Thieves, you'll be preparing for Boston, but you'll also be preparing for Optic, Toronto. You'll do some prep for the round 2 match because they might be relatively confident they're going to beat Boston here. It might not happen, but it might be the easiest to call of all the round 1 matches, at least in theory. So they might be looking ahead. Other teams aren't probably looking that far ahead. They've just got to focus on their round 1 game, right? Because winning this game is so important. I don't think anyone's ever won champs without winning winners round 1. So you've got to win it pretty much. I mean, if you drop down to losers, it's probably chalked, but it still can maybe happen. It's just not going to happen more than likely to make the run to win the entire tournament. But yeah, Optic of course play Toronto. They're not going to scrim them. They're not really going to scrim Thieves either, because if they beat Toronto, they'd think they might play Thieves second round. Same with Boston, just in case. Now, if Optic were to lose, they'll probably play a team for the other side, but if they lose, it's already at a tough point in the tournament, so you might as well get practice against the other teams. So that's what Rambo was saying. FaZe, New York, London, and Seattle, these are the 4 teams that Optic are currently practicing against. Could be a perfect set of 4 teams to play against, actually, because New York plays very fundamentally good hardpoint. I think in the respawns, Optic can learn a lot from playing these teams on a regular basis. London have a different style, but online it tends to work very effectively. FaZe, of course, and Seattle and New York, all great teams at Bakash hardpoint, a weakness in Optic's map pool, so playing them consistently might be a key difference maker as we go forwards. And also Berlin, Seattle like Berlin, London like Berlin a lot. FaZe don't play it much at all, but New York definitely are decent at Berlin as well. So there's a lot of good practice here, I think, in terms of the respawns that Optic can get in some of their key weaknesses. And also playing control, both, I mean, London are terrible at control, so you won't learn much from that. But Seattle, they've been very good at parts of the season. New York and FaZe most certainly, right? So I feel like in terms of the weaknesses that Optic have had, playing at these 4 teams are largely very good teams to actually be practicing against. So definitely tweet your thoughts on that one in the comment section. Of course, not scrimming against Thieves right now, not scrimming Boston, not scrimming, of course, their first round partners in the Toronto Ultra. Makes a fair bit of sense. I mean, Insight right here, well, he's looking like Shotzzy. I thought Shotzzy was an Optic. Says Octane in the replies, because, I mean, yeah, the movement here from Insight, just absolutely undefeated. Plops straight down to his death. And I mean, yeah, Chicken Nugget, or no, Chicken Burger 50, sorry, is back in the replies. For some reason, he's always in Octane's replies, but, my bad, Chicken Burger, back at it again. Now, it seems like FaZe are relatively keen to actually play Optic at this tournament. Of course, for that to happen, they'd have to make quite a run in the bracket. Like, I mean, yeah, they won't play each other here before the winners' finals, at which point both teams would be guaranteed top 3, unless, of course, they drop down to losers, in which case that becomes more possible because the bracket will flip more than likely, or I'm not exactly sure what the bracket will look like in losers for the losing teams, but of course, they're going to focus on just winning that winners round 1 game regardless. But yeah, FaZe, are they the favourites for this tourney? I think in terms of the numbers right now, the bookies odds, they probably marginally are the favourites over Los Angeles Thieves, just because number 1 seed, number 1 team in the game in terms of standings this season. But of course, as an organisation, this is the first time they've ever gone into the World Championship without winning an event, because they won a couple, I think, during Modern Warfare before champs. Of course, last year they won, 3 events before the World Championship itself. They won 3 of the majors going into champs. Like, I mean, yeah, they're strong on all maps apart from Berlin Hardpoint. This to me is kind of interesting, actually, because they're Berlin Hardpoint, they're 2-6 on. They're pretty much great at everything apart from Berlin Hardpoint, right? And that's the thing, when they play Optic, like if they were to play Optic, and as they did at Major 4, it was a surprise that Optic didn't go the Berlin Hardpoint route as they could have done, rather than going for a Bocage, because FaZe vetoed Berlin Hardpoint 25 times this season. It's their most vetoed Hardpoint map in the entire game, but yet, I mean, yeah, they pretty much ban it against most people they play, but against Optic, I think it was floated, and the possibility was there to pick it. They didn't decide to, right? But who knows, like, based on their practice they're having behind the scenes right now, whether come the World Championship, if they do get to match up, it will potentially could be a rather different story in terms of their results. And as even Simp says right here in a discussion with the COD League, saying, okay, which team would he most like to play at the World Championship? He mentions 2 specific names. Firstly, Toronto, because they generally have good matches against Toronto, but always beat Toronto as well, which I'm sure is a positive thing for FaZe and, of course, Simp. But I mean, yeah, Optic are a different story, right? He says, yeah, it would be fun to play Optic. The 2 fan bases match up very nicely indeed. And I wonder what a rematch would look like in terms of the map vetoes and stuff if it were to happen.
If there was one team that I would play at champs, it'd probably have to be like Optic or Toronto, just because I feel like against them it's always a good match, and I feel like our 2 fan bases is always fire.
So that's going to do it for today. Just wanted to finish out with this. I thought was kind of interesting. Just this is on the Valorant side, right? But I mean, as Optic say here, imagine adding the Optic skin collection to your inventory. I wonder when this is going to happen, if ever, right? When teams in Valorant, I think it will happen probably sooner rather than later, when teams themselves are in the partnership league next season, which Optic might well be for Valorant. Franchising effectively is what they're going to do there. They might well add something like this into the game for those teams, which I thought you'd have thought Call of Duty would have done a long time ago, right? Which, okay, I guess they kind of have in very mediocre ways, but this, of course, it would be way better. So I'm sure they're looking at this, and the social guys thinking, yeah, I'm going to second it, and Hex is thinking as well, like, let us do it in COD next year, especially because Modern Warfare 2022 is a 2-year title. There really are no excuses not to get something like this done. But very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit on the like button. Tells the YouTube gods it's a good video, and I was like, you should see it as well, and I've grown the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you for watching as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.